Hi friends, welcome! Today I'm going to show you how you can make a stained glass cross to put up on your window. This one right here is made out of construction paper, and then I have two others right over here. This one is made out of acrylic paint or craft paint, and this one's made out of colorful Sharpie. So if you want to join in, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the construction paper to make our stained glass cross, and you can hang it up on your window to remember and celebrate Jesus this Easter. So let's get started. So I first want to show you just a couple of examples of stained glass so that you have an idea of what we're creating when we create our own cross stained glass. And a lot of times these are found in windows of churches. And so we'll get to talk about this later, but I just wanted you to have an idea of what a true stained glass looks like, especially within a church. So before we begin, I want to show you the different crosses that you can choose from so that you're able to decide which one you want to make. So the one on the far left I made with acrylic paint or any craft paint. I do not recommend using watercolor though. The one in the middle is what I'm going to be demonstrating, and that I used scraps of different colored construction paper. And then on the one on the right, I used colorful Sharpie. And when you hang it up in the window, it's actually a lot brighter. It's about as bright as the acrylic paint on the left. Any permanent marker will work great, but washable markers like Crayola will not work on this. So let's begin. The materials you will need to create your cross will include a Ziploc bag, tape, glue. I preferred using wet glue, but you could use a glue stick, black scraps of construction paper, and then either your choice of Sharpies, paint, or construction paper. So the first part of the project, we're going to need to cut a gallon-sized baggie. And because the baggies are so thin, it's a little difficult to cut without tearing it, so I recommend a parent does this. You're just going to take your scissors and you're going to cut along the sides and the bottom, and then you're going to have two pieces of clear material for our cross. Now if you have contact paper at home, that would be great to use. I would love to have some scraps of laminator paper from school, but we're all kind of just using what we have at home. And you can even do a smaller cross if you just have quart-sized baggies as well. Alright friends, so the next step is to tape down our baggie just so it doesn't move while we're creating our cross. And then I took a piece of construction paper and drew the cross and cut it out just so I would have a template. So this is something that you can either do freehand, or I also recommend that parents for little ones trace the cross on the baggie, and I just used a black Sharpie. Now if you're going to use the acrylic paint or the colorful Sharpies, then I first recommend taking your black Sharpie and creating a grid like stained glass so that it'll separate your colors. But if you're going to follow along with me, then I recommend just cutting some long strips of colorful construction paper, and we're just going to create different shapes out of them. We're going to make some small squares, rectangles, triangles, and just get a pile of all different colors before we glue them down on our cross. So now we're ready to glue. I tried using both the glue stick and the wet glue, and I just thought that the wet glue made it stay a little bit better, but you can use either one. And I'm just going to put a little bit of wet glue on the back of my first shape, and you can start anywhere. And really all I did is I took the different shapes and I glued them down. I stayed inside of the cross, but I let a little bit of space in between each shape so that whenever I put it on the window, it'll look like stained glass. And as I'm filling it up, I might find that there's some spots that there just isn't room for something I have. So what I've done is I've gone back in and I've cut smaller shapes to fill that space. So while we're putting together our stained glass cross, I kind of want to talk to you about the history of stained glass and why we're celebrating Easter. So stained glass actually was created over 1,000 years ago. And it's colorful glass that artists would put together, kind of like putting a puzzle together to create art. And churches started using stained glass because 1,000 years ago, they did not have electricity or light. So they needed a lot of large windows so that light could come through to their church. And they thought not only would stained glass be really beautiful, but the artwork could be pictures that would share the story of God's Word. They'd be stories from the Bible. Do you have any favorite stories from the Bible? So one of my absolute favorite stories from the Bible is about Jesus' resurrection, which is what we're celebrating on Easter. And I believe that Easter is the absolute most special day of the year. I think it's so special because we celebrate Easter to remember the really big sacrifice that Jesus made for us so that we could be saved. Me, you, your parents, and your friends saved us from the sins we commit so that we can be with God in heaven one day. And Easter helps us to remember that Jesus died and he came back from the dead. It's such a great celebration. And one of my favorite things to do on Easter is an Easter tradition. It's a greeting. And I love to greet my family by saying, "He is risen." And then the other person responds with, "He is risen indeed." So this greeting goes back a very long time ago. And whenever we say the word he and he is risen, we're talking about Jesus. And the reason that we say is risen instead of he has risen is because it's not something that he did do, but something he's still doing, because he still remains risen. So I encourage you to greet someone in your family, maybe this Sunday on Easter, by saying he is risen. And hopefully they'll reply with, "He is risen indeed." I know that I'll be doing that as one of my favorite greetings. And it's fun to teach other people too, because it's a new thing for a lot of people. Okay. So I am finishing up my cross right now, and I've made some smaller little pieces to fit in the little extra spaces. I might have had to cut a few pieces down, and that's okay. And also, I like that there's a few spots and places that maybe don't have any construction paper, because when I put it on the window, that's going to be where the light will shine through. Okay, so the next step will include having some strips of black construction paper. You can really use any color, and I made different thicknesses in all three of my crosses, and I noticed when it's a little bit thicker, it makes it easier to cut out and it stays down a little better. So I'm just kind of measuring the sides of my cross, and I put just a little bit of wet glue on the back, and I'm going to put it down to where it half covers the objects inside the cross, and then it half covers the outside of the cross. And then I just kind of follow along the outside of the cross, and I just measure by placing down the paper, and then I'll cut it. And again, I just put a little bit of glue on the back, and then I'm going to place it down by overlapping a little bit of the construction paper onto my baggie. And you're going to do this all the way around the cross. Okay, now that we have the black construction paper all around our cross, we're ready to let it dry and then take off our tape so that we can start cutting out our cross from our baggie. And I just cut around the black paper nice and slow, and then just throwing away my baggie scraps. Great job! Now that we're done, we can hang it on our window. And when you flip it over, you might be able to see your glue marks, but that's okay. No one from outside would be able to notice that. So I hope you had a lot of fun creating either your construction paper stained glass cross, or maybe you used acrylic paint for your cross, or even your colorful Sharpies. So I hope you had a lot of fun, and I wish you a very happy Easter.